Good morning, sir, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to the final day forenoon session of this STTP Phase 2 on blockchain for identity management. The speaker of the session is Dr. S. Venkatesan. He is an associate professor at the Indian Institute of Information Technology, Allahabad. He obtained his PhD degree from Anna University in 2010. His research interests include mobile agent security, applied cryptography, blockchain, and cloud computing. He spent 2.2 years in collaborative directed basic research on smart and secure environment projects funded by the National Technical Research Organization as a scientific associate. He has published his research works in several high quality journals and conferences. On behalf of the Management and Department of Information Technology, I especially thank Dr. S. Venkatesan for accepting our invitation and to share his knowledge and thoughts on the topic. I am sure that all the participants will feel enriched with the knowledge after completion of this session. I welcome you all once again to the session and hope that you will all be benefited. Thank you all. Over to you, sir. You can start.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, madam.
Thank you, sir.
Just 1 second, madam.
Sure, sir, sure.
So I hope the slides are visible.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay,
It's visible,
okay.
sir.
Thank you, madam. So good morning, everyone. I'm happy to interact with you all, and I would like to thank the organizers for this opportunity. So today I'll be discussing about the application of blockchain technology. So the application considered here is the identity management. Before going into the identity management, let's have some brief about the blockchain. In these 5 days or 4 days, you might have gone through a lot of things about the blockchain, and you all know that blockchain is the distributed data structure, or we can say distributed storage or the distributed ledger. So why we call it as the distributed data structure is, you imagine the linked list where we'll be having nodes. The nodes in blockchain is the blocks, and the pointer, whatever we have there as a integer pointer or character pointer. Here it is cryptography hash pointer. And you know that if you are making a small change in the input, the hashing algorithm, which is deterministic and random, that gives the massive effect in the output. So that's why it was preferred by Satoshi Nakamoto when he or they or she developed it. And another thing, it is not completely the new concept, we can say, which was introduced in 2008. Actually, in 1980 itself, the base or some idea of blockchain was introduced in a thesis. Later in 1990s, Stuart, Scott, and Haber, they also used the Merkle tree concept in this to bring out some, we can say, immutable timestamp. Later in 2008, when anonymous Satoshi Nakamoto brought the concept, it got very popular. It is not that he has collected and brought the concept. He has also done good work in that, and he brought the idea, and it got very popular because of two reasons. One is the features what the blockchain contains, and second, he introduced with cryptocurrency, which is Bitcoin. So you know that when the money comes, the popularity will be more. And today I read some article. I have seen the article. I have not gone through it completely. It's given in Dinamalar that it is the value of Bitcoin. One Bitcoin will be 3 crore in future. So right now it may be approximately near to 10 lakhs, but they predict that it will be of 3 crores in future. And one more very important thing, once you start the blockchain application, you cannot stop it. So it is like there is no individual controller to stop it. Even though Anderson is managing the Bitcoin development, further development, it's not possible for him to control it because it's scattered across the world. Even if we say that government of India stops Bitcoin, or we can say ban Bitcoin, it is not that the Bitcoin processing is going to stop. Even if we say half of the countries in this world going to ban the Bitcoin, then also Bitcoin will survive because it's scattered. If we all are there, if I say I want to stop it, I have to leave from that. You all will be managing the network. So in this way, the blockchain applications, once it is developed and it's made as very distributed, that means scattered, then it is very, very tough to control the application. And the application is having the life till the growth of the application. That is the growth of the blocks. Whenever the block gets stop growing, then we can say so and so application is dead, because the transactions are committed only when the blocks are mined or created. Once we say that the blocks are stopped, then we can say there is no transaction. If there is no transaction, means there is no movement in the application. So we can announce that the particular application is dead. And next thing with the blockchain is the computation and storage. So when we talk about the computation, we know that the permissionless blockchain, it may be Bitcoin or Ethereum or other cryptocurrencies, it uses the proof of work based consensus algorithm. So when we talk about the proof of consensus, you know that we have to solve very hard puzzle, which is very, very hard to solve. And we don't have any shortcut to solve the puzzle. We have only brute force method to solve the puzzle. So when we have to solve the puzzle, we have to invest lot of computation. That means too much infrastructure we have to invest with respect to consumption of electricity or whatever carbon footprint we are going to emit. That means the system going to emit. These are like the overhead for the computation. And next, when it comes into the storage, the blocks are keep on growing and we need to store the blocks continuously. That's from the genesis block to the entire life cycle of the application. We have to store the blocks. If we don't store the blocks, then we can say somebody will come and make chain replacement attack or fault block insertion attack, because we know that, right, in the permissionless blockchain, or we can say the probabilistic consensus algorithm, wherever we use, the chain which is having the longest path will be considered as the main chain, and the another one will go as the, we know that it will be like the fork. So the storage is also important. When it comes into some application where we will not be having sufficient infrastructure to store our blockchain, then what happens, we may not be in position to use that particular blockchain technology for our application. So let's consider that we are going for IoT devices. So we can consider the IoT devices also connected with different high-end servers, but we want IoT devices also to participate in the blockchain. So if we see right now, around 2 years before, I have seen the Ethereum blockchain size. It was around 667 GB. I think I have considered for 10 nodes. So that much memory may not be provided by the IoT devices. Then how it can store? So there was the concept introduced, IOTA. That is also one of the blockchain technology. We cannot say that as the blocks created there. They keep only the transactions and they make the directed graph. So that has the facility to take the snapshot. So what the snapshot says is, you keep on storing the triangle, that's the directed graph. At some point of time, you may not be in position to store the complete, the further transactions. So what you can do is, you can take the consolidated or the complete statistic of the transactions till now and delete the directed graph up till now. So then you can accommodate the future subtangles. That's the directed graph. So in that way, the devices which is not having or which are not having sufficient storage can also accommodate. But the problem is they want that at least few nodes, like developer nodes or the permanent nodes, that should store the complete tank. So we are also working on it. How can we reduce the storage consumption? And even we have submitted our abstract and waiting for the decision. So we want to reduce the storage required for the blockchain. So we are making that as constant storage blockchain. So like this, there are some problems also. So when you go for your research and you want to apply the blockchain technology for your applications, you have to justify with all these aspects. Because let's say I'm going to use for e-health record management system, and there are hospitals connected with that. So if you are going for mining based blockchain, who will be doing the mining, and what is the reward you are going to give? So there will be a lot of questions raised, and how the blocks will be stored, and how long you will be storing that, what is the memory requirement. So your obvious answer for that is Hyperledger Fabric. You might have gone through already. So even if you are having Hyperledger Fabric, that reduces the computational requirements, but the storage as it is, you have to maintain. Even though it has the world state to access the recent data from the database, but you have to completely store all the transactions. That is all the blocks. If you don't store, as I said, there may be the fraudulent chain replacement attack, or we can say the fraudulent block insertion attack happens. So all these things you have to take into consideration when you are going to develop your blockchain applications. So, and another thing, if any of you having doubts, you can raise it. No need to wait till I complete my lecture. Okay, in between you can interrupt me. There is no issue. So as I said, my topic is on identity management. So I will focus more on identity management. I'll not be focusing exactly on some identity management. I have some 2, 3 techniques that it's not mine. I have read from various sources that I will be discussing. And one of our models also there that I will give some little introduction about that. I hope I am audible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. So before I get into the topic, I would like to thank the authors or various web sources from where I have taken the content and figure for this discussion purpose. So are you able to see this slide, that blockchain classification?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, madam. So you know that we have different types of blockchain. What happens when the blockchain was introduced in 2008 by anonymous Satoshi Nakamoto? It was simply blockchain. Even that time it was two different words, block and chain. Now they made it as a single word, that's blockchain. That time there was nothing like permissionless, public, private, or whatever it may be. So he has given the term as the blockchain. Later what happened, people have seen the features of the blockchain, and they thought that why don't we go for some variants. So then they come with the different variants. So they made whatever was introduced by Satoshi Nakamoto as the permissionless blockchain or public blockchain, and then they brought another blockchain which is the permissioned blockchain. And you know what's the difference. In case of permissionless, any users will be allowed without any identity verification, but in case of permissioned, there is a restriction. There will be a controller like membership service provider in Hyperledger Fabric. He will validate or he will verify the identity of the user and allow to take part in the chain. And further, they divide the permissioned blockchain into two. One is, so you know that in blockchain, if we see, there are two important operations. One is verifiability and another one is updating the, or we can say writing the data into the ledger. So when it comes into public verifiability and we don't give public writing, then we can say that as the public permissioned blockchain. If we say both verifiability as well as the writing feature only to the restricted set of users, then we can say that as the private permissioned blockchain. So like this, the blockchains are classified, and we know that we have this one also, that is private blockchain. So many may say that private blockchain and permission blockchain both are same. Actually, what is there in private blockchain is, let's say I have the permissionless blockchain, that's the implementation, which is Ethereum, that I can apply for the private blockchain also. So how I can control the private into that is, or I can have the private network into that is, you know that there is a Genesis block, and from the Genesis block only the network is built, because each and every participant should have the same Genesis block. If they have different Genesis block, they cannot make the common network. So what, as a private application, network application owner, what I will do is I will give those Genesis block only to the known person. That means whom I want to allow. So then what happens? I am making the private network. So in that way, we can say, or that will be called as the private blockchain. So otherwise, we have permissionless blockchain and private blockchain. And we know that the first version, that is blockchain version 1.0, is the Bitcoin implementation. And when that is the permissionless blockchain implementation. When it comes into blockchain version 2.0, where Ethereum comes into place, Ethereum is also similar to Bitcoin implementation. We cannot say exactly similar, because Bitcoin works based on transaction, Ethereum works based on account balance. But Ethereum has an advantage, that's the smart contract, where we can build different applications, that is the decentralized applications. Next, the blockchain version 3.0 was introduced, that is Hyperledger Fabric, but still there are some say that Hyperledger Fabric comes with blockchain 2.0 only. So if we see Hyperledger Fabric and the Ethereum implementation, in Ethereum, there is the base. That base is the cryptocurrency. On top of it, we can build any of the decentralized application. That means if you want to run the decentralized application on top of the Ethereum, you must have the account in the Ethereum cryptocurrency. Then only you can build the application on top of it. That's why if you see research papers, they say that we have to spend this much gas and all. When it comes into Hyperledger Fabric, it's only the open source framework. On top of it, you can build the application. So there is nothing like on the back end or on the base, there will be a cryptocurrency running and you are building on top of it. So that advantage Hyperledger Fabric gives. So when it comes into version 4.0, people talks about bringing the, we can say this one, that artificial intelligence into it. So even now, for the federated machine learning, they use the blockchain. So which I don't have much idea, but I have gone through that concept when I was reviewing a paper. So now let's see that when you want to have an application or develop an application and you want to use blockchain on that, that's what that is, you want to have the applied blockchain application. So when you are going for any application and planning to apply blockchain, you have to make sure that whether you want blockchain for that or not. The reason is, these days you can see papers, so many, without any proper justification why the blockchain is used for that application. So right now COVID is going on and many people are applying blockchain for that. And there are so many works already reported, including ours, that we store the data, electronic health record in the blockchain, but we solve different research problems also. But you can see papers, they just consider the blockchain as a tool, that's a database, and you put the data and extract there. So this and all, when you go for publication in good places, that is forums, then you may not be in position to defend your paper. So it is very much required. You have to justify what is the need of using blockchain. And it is also very much required to justify that only blockchain can solve this problem, not others. The reason is, as I said, you have to invest a lot with respect to storage and computation. In that case, you have to give the justification. So if we are going for any application, in that case, we have to decide what type of blockchain we need, or we don't need blockchain. So we can use this flow diagram to decide that. So the first question we have to ask is, do you need to store the state? So which means we know the finite state machine, and for each and every input, and based on the base state, we will be moving to other states. And since this is the distributed system, we will be having the state replicas, that is the state replication machine with every participants, and we want all of them to be in the same state at a particular point of time. But that's not so easy until unless we have the synchronous network, because if you see all of your mobile, we all will be having the same time. But if we see our watch, that is the wristwatch or the wall clock, then you may see there are different times. Okay, so in that case, and the entire world is participating in the blockchain application. So you cannot say that all of are having the same time. So here the time means the Linux timestamp, or we can say it is the Unix timestamp. So all of them will not be having the same time. So we can say with some bounded delay, we want all of them to be in the same state. So if you want to store the state, that means for every operation, you will be changing the state, and then you want to maintain that state. If it is so, then go for the next question to consider blockchain. Otherwise, drop the idea of going for the blockchain. Next is, are there multiple writers? That means if you say, yes, I want to store the state, then the next question is, are there multiple writers? So if we have only the administrator, and administrator is going to handle the complete database, then there is no need of blockchain. So if you have multiple writers, then we have to think of blockchain. So then let's go to the next question. The next question is, can you use an always online TTP? That is the trusted third party. So in different applications, we can say that in different applications, we can say that there will be a trusted third party involved. As in Hyperledger network also, we have the membership service provider, but it's not that he is the one always going to control. But there may be some cases we'll be having online trusted third party. That means for each and every activity, the trusted third party comes into the picture. So if that is the case, then better you drop the idea of using the blockchain. If you have online TTP, then don't use blockchain. The next question is, that is, if you don't have the online TTP, then the next question is, are all writers known? That means whoever is going to participate in the network, who is going to modify the data, are known or not. In case you don't know all of them, then go for permissionless blockchain, which allows any user to participate into the network. And if you know them, the next question is, are all writers trusted? If you trust all of them, then again, there is no need of using blockchain for your application. Otherwise, you put the next question, is public verifiability required? That is, you want anybody to verify the transactions, whatever is put on the blockchain. If it is so, then go for public permissioned blockchain. Otherwise, go for private permissioned blockchain. That means you want only the restricted users could read and write and validate your transactions. So in that case, you have to go for the private permissioned blockchain. So in this way, you can decide what type of blockchain you have to use. And next thing, whether we can use the blockchain or not. Okay, so this is the classification given, and flow diagram and classification. And there are various other methodology also to choose that. You can also refer those things that will give you more idea. So if you have any questions, then please let me know.
No, sir. Proceed.
Okay. So now let me get into this identity management. So we all know when the word management comes, it is the complete life cycle. That is from the creation to the deletion of something. Okay, that's what the management comes into place. But if you see this definition, so these definitions are taken from various sources. It's a framework of policies and technologies for ensuring that the proper people in an enterprise have the appropriate access to the technology resources. So here what it says is that we want to have the identity so that we can give right access or authorized access only to the right people, not to everyone. But when the word management comes, so the creation of identity also one of the parameters in the management, that is identity creation, identity management, and the identity deletion. Or sometimes what happened, we will go for re-identity. That means uh, creating a new identity. So that is also part of the identity management. So now when we have these identities, the identities are maybe like our face and some devices, whatever is given to us, it may be the ID card, whatever it may be. So through that, somebody will verify, yes, you are the respective and authorize, and they give the access to the data or the resources. So this is the reason we go for the identity. So now I hope you are able to see the slides.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, because it's showing net is unstable for me, that's why. So the identities can be the physical ID or it can be the digital identity. So in case of physical ID, the government or the schools or the colleges or different places, they give some identity card to us. So it is to attest that you are so and so person. It may be for the citizen, student, member, employee, or customer. So everyone will be having the identity card, and that is used in various places to prove that you are the person what you are claiming for or what you are claiming. So, but it has various problems, like the process of obtaining them is often time consuming, bureaucratic, and costly. So this we cannot do anything, otherwise people will do various fraud activities. And very important thing that if you lose your ID, and it's not so easy to obtain the new one. Okay, I don't know how many of you experienced that. Once in Chennai, I lost my purse and I was having my original driving license in that. And bank card, debit cards were also there, but I was not having money. I was not bothered about it. So when I went to go for getting the duplicate driving license, they said you go to the police station and file the FIR. So when I went to the police station, they were telling that you lost it in Chennai, you have to file the FIR there. And I belongs to a village near Pondicherry. That is Viluppuram Pondicherry border. I belongs to Tamil Nadu only. So then I thought where to go and give the complaint in Chennai, because I lost it in train. I don't know where it was missed. So like this, it's not so easy to get your ID card reissued once you lose that. Even in our organization, if we lose our identity card, that is the employee identity card, we should file FIR. But right now we have facility like online FIR. We can do that also and get it. But you know, it's not so easy to do all these things. The reason is once we file FIR, the police has to act on it, and it will be very complex for them. So the next problem is it can be defrauded, and you know that what people do is they can print different ID cards like ours. So even we can say in some of the movie we might have seen that the duplicate will look like more original than the original one. So in that way also somebody may be caught. Okay, so like that people can do. So like this, there are so many other problems when we are going for the physical IDs, because we have to always keep with us, and we don't know if we are running or if we are going, and if there is a rain, then there is again the possibility ours will get damaged. So many other things. So the next is the digital IDs. When it comes into the digital ID, mostly when we are using the web resources, like we have the Google account, that is the email account and bank account, you know that if we see these days, each and every one will be having at least, that's the minimum 10 accounts they will be having. And I don't know how many accounts I am having. All my passwords are written in the diary. It's complete one page, because I could not remember all those things. So similarly, I know many are having that. And you know, this is not the suggested way. Since I am working as a cyber security researcher, even I am also doing the same. Okay, we don't have alternate. The alternate we can say, one is we can have the common password or username for all. The second is you can put all your passwords, encrypt it using another key so that you will remember only that key. The problem is, the first problem comes, if you are going to keep the common username and password, if it is leaked out or compromised in one place, so you are completely compromised. The second thing, when you are having in a storage and it gets encrypted, mostly what people does is they don't keep it in their storage, because they don't trust their machine, because at any time it may be crashed. So they go for the third party. There, what is the guarantee that third party is not definitely it is encrypted. It's not so easy for them to crack that, but what will happen if it is lost? So there are various reasons people go for such kind of things like writing and having the common password. So the first problem here is, in case of digital identities, having to register and sign up with different login credentials to every online service is a cumbersome for the user. So it's not so easy. Next, managing multiple passwords is hard, and using the same password is a security risk. And third, the verification of your credential is dependent on the availability of the issuer. Let's say we have this Aadhaar. Okay, so this may not be the right example, but let's consider that. And we have Aadhaar server, and when we go for any new account creation in the bank, you have to be validated through your Aadhaar. And let's say if the particular server is down for some reason, then you cannot do any activity. So you might have seen in various news that due to some server, the complete service is down, because your identity will be verified through so and so server. If it is down, then you will not be in position to get your service. So this is also the other problem. So like this, there are many problems even if you are going for the digital IDs. So then people thought of to go for blockchain. So as I already said, it has various advantages. So we know that blockchain is a distributed database that contains cryptographically connected growing blocks so that we can ensure that data input is immutable, and clients, whoever will have the exact copy of the blocks. It may not be all the clients, the ones who will be actively participating in the blockchain activities. So here actively means the one who is going to mine the blocks or create the blocks. Other than the behind the vast use of blockchain, know that the last 10 years, it's not last 5 years, huge. The usage of blockchain in various applications. You may not see the real-time implementation, but people are doing research that is on the applied blockchain technology. So major reason behind the vast use of blockchain is that the chance of modification on intermediate block is less possible. Here you see that I have not mentioned as not possible, I have mentioned as less possible. The reason, you know, that's the 51% of the hash power with the attacker, or more than 70% of the nodes are compromised, then that is possible. So modification on intermediate block is less possible since the blocks are cryptographically connected. So it gives various advantages, that it provides decentralization, integrity of the data is maintained, we have public verifiability, and it brings the trust. So because of all these above things, it brings the trust. So this is the reason it is used in various applications. Okay, so I will come to this after question. So for identity management, so this is the general question. Maybe if you are interested, you can give the question answer. Otherwise, I will carry on. So now for identity management, by seeing this particular flow diagram, what will you choose out of these four? Now we have to go for identity management. So which one you will choose out of these four? I hope I am audible, and I hope the question is clear. So which blockchain or which one you will choose out of this for this identity management?
Sir, they have put in the chat box, sir.
Okay, just a minute, madam. Private permissioned blockchain. Okay. The question is, how do identity management impact public and private blockchain? Madam, can you little elaborate this question? I am not able to get this question. How do identity management impact? Anyway, I will come to that question maybe later also. So it is given as private permissioned blockchain. Okay. So then any other answer? Don't use blockchain. Multiple writers are not there. Okay. Then anything else? So here multiple writers means, let's say, like we all are here, we create our IDs and put into the blockchain. Maybe when I move to the further slides, you will get more idea about it. So any other answer? Public permission also. Okay. Okay. So if there is something else, please put it very fast. Otherwise, I will move on to the slides. See, maybe some things that we are not into this area, so no need to think about it. So please don't think like that. Okay. Maybe sometimes you need to have blockchain in your area also, or you can say you are something getting new thing, or you are going to research in some new thing. Okay, think in that perspective also. Okay. So now I hope you have already gone through this in Ethereum and Hyperledger, right? Please don't put in chat box. I cannot open that each and every time. Is that discussed, Ethereum? Am I connected?
Yes, sir. Ethereum is discussed.
Okay, okay, thank you. So how the address is derived in that? So you know that we have the key pair, the public key, the private key is derived considering the parameters available with the code. Then we will derive the public key, and that public key is given to the hash function that produces some output, which is 32 bytes. Out of that 32 bytes, first 12 bytes we drop, remaining 20 bytes we take as the address. Okay, this is the address of the participant. And we will not be having the sufficient resource to map the user identity, that is the address of Ethereum, with any individual. So now when any user makes a transaction, okay, he signs the transaction and sends it. That's it. What he or she does is, or he takes the he creates the transaction with source address, destination address, then the value what has to be transferred, the timestamp will be there, and signature which is signed using his or her private key and sent to the network, that is broadcasted to the network. Now the people in this network will see the source address, destination address, and the value. After that, they validate the signature. So how they validate the signature? They apply the private public key. So normally in Ethereum, what happens? The public key is not known beforehand, but elliptic curve digital signature algorithm gives the provision where we can derive the public key from the signature whatever is sent. So they will derive the public key. Once they derive the public key, it is not sufficient to verify the signature. So what they do is, once the public key is known, again that public key is given to the hash function, that is the same hash function. The output which we get in 32 bytes, the 12 bytes will be dropped, the first 12 bytes will be dropped, remaining 20 will be compared with the source address. If both are mapping, then we say yes, so and so person is spending the coin, not other. So in this way the identity is validated. So here the identity is not the one which is having the facility to map with the individual. It is the identity whatever is created for the Ethereum, and that gets validated in this way. Okay. So which is completely through the public key. We can say the public key is derived from the scalar private key, but when it comes into the receiver side, that's the participant side, they will be deriving the public key. From that, the identity of the user will be validated. So we have this online identity, which is the one category of the digital identity. It is a social identity that an internet user establishes in online communities and websites. So for every website, we'll be having the identity. It can also be considered as an actively constructed presentation of oneself. Okay, so when we present it to some of the websites, it seems that we are actively participating because the website knows that yes, you are the person sitting there right now. Through that, uh, through your identity, that's whatever credential you provide. So the server side will understand, yes, you are actively sitting. But it's only the assumption. Maybe someone else also sitting, because the account may, in case of the account is compromised. And what happens in this online identity is we don't have the control of our credential. Okay, we have the credential with us, but that is maintained in a centralized authority. So in their storage, if it is deleted, then you don't have any way to prove your ownership there. In the very earlier times, they keep the plain password in their storage. If the storage is compromised, then we all are compromised. So later they brought the concept of hashing. So they don't store the plain passwords, only hashes of the passwords are stored, so that even somebody compromise, they cannot see what is your plain password. But if the particular server is down, you will not be in position to prove yourself. Or if that storage is deleted, we know that these days they will be having so many backups and other facilities are there to recover. That's the different case. In case the administrator lost the data, then you will not be in the position to prove yourself, and the control is completely with the administrator. The next type of identity is that self-sovereign identity. So here what happens, it is the concept that users should be able to control their own digital identity. So this provision is given. The user will control their digital identity. It is not that some centralized authority or administrator will control, only the user will control. But please don't think that everything is done by the user. Definitely there is a third party involved in it. So people and businesses can store their own identity data on their own devices and provide their identity to those who need to validate it. So they will keep all their identity in their own storage. Just 1 second, please. So they store their identity in their own devices, and whenever somebody or the user want to prove themselves, then these things will be provided without relying on a centralized repository. That means to validate, for example, if I have to validate my see, I can give some other example. I don't know how many of you having account in Overleaf, which is the LaTeX editor. So you don't need to have separate account for Overleaf. And similarly, there are many things, including GitHub. You don't need to have the separate account for it. You can have, if you are having the Gmail account or so in those cases, what happens if the Gmail server, that means we are depending on the Gmail server to prove our credential to the GitHub. If we say that if I am going to have all those things, then what happens, even though if Gmail is not working, I can prove my credential to the GitHub. So similarly to any other applications. So that facility is given in the self-sovereign identity. So you can see here, as I said here itself, it is not that only the client he creates and he himself proves to everyone that I am so and so. It's not that there is a third party involved. You can see that the claim issuer is there. So this is the picture taken from this particular source. That's why if you see this look like something not from India. So there are three entities given here. One is the claim holder, that's the client, or we can say the user, and the claim issuer, maybe the government or the educational organization. Then the someone who is going to verify the identity. So at first, what happens? This guy, the user, he creates his ID. Once he creates his ID, he give that to the government. Okay, then what government does? It validates the identity and it gives some seal on it. Let's say uh, like a signature on that. Once that signature is there, what he does is he stores that with him. So right now I am going for not going for blockchain. So please consider without the blockchain concept. So what happens is he gives his identity to this particular issuer, and this issuer approves by signing it and giving back to the claim holder. Then what happened? The claim holder, if you want to prove to the verifier, he gives that to this particular guy, and this guy who is well aware of this claim issuer signature, so he will consider, yes, he is approved by this claim issuer and he is so and so person. So in that way, the identity will be verified. So it's like I am having the driving license, okay, which is physical driving license I am having, which I am holding it. We can say this is also a self-sovereign identity when it is the physical one. So I go to some organization, maybe the RTO office. There also again I have to prove something else through my voter ID or other things. Then I got it approved by the RTO and I am having the card with me. So whenever I want to prove to the traffic police, then I will be showing my ID card, that driving license, and it will be proved. And they see the seal of the so and so government RTO office, and they say they find that yes, it's proper. Earlier there were various fraudulent activity happens. Now they are attaching the chip, so through that also they can verify. But here the scenario is different. They are bringing the blockchain into this. So what happens here is he at first as a client, he goes and create the account here. Okay, first he creates the account into the blockchain. So what account creation means? He, if you see in the Ethereum, there is a Merkle Patricia trie, and for every user there is a node allotted. Okay, so consider that case, and if this guy goes to register, there is a node created for him. That means he is part of the blockchain network, and in that particular one he may put his identity. He should put his identity, but I will discuss more about what is that identity in later slides. So he put his identity here. And similarly, this particular issuer, that is the government, also having the registration in the blockchain. So now all are having the registration, including this guy. Now later what happens? This particular guy goes for the claim approval, that is the identity approval from this organization. Then what he does, he send all his details to this particular entity. It may be the RTO office. What this RTO office do, they validate all the things. Then this particular office signs the data, that is the particular attributes or the credentials, we can say. So it signs and give back to this guy. So once it comes back to this guy, and what he does is he will be again signing on that document and put it into the blockchain. Or we can say he is holding that without putting into the blockchain. So that means the blockchain is having the identity of this guy and identity of this guy, and he is having something which is signed by this guy as well as this guy. Now the client or the prover is going to the verifier to prove that he or she is so and so. Now, what this verifier will do, the verifier will, that means he has given that double signed, that is the RTO office signed and his own signed credential to this guy. So what this guy will do, this guy will fetch their identity from here. So what here identity means, the one which is used for the signature. So he will take that from the blockchain and he will validate the signature. If the signature is valid, then the verifier will accept whatever the client given to the, we can say, the verifier. So here, what identity means? So identity means the address of the particular claim issuer or the claim holder, but what should be used for the signature is the key. Okay, that's the public key will be present here. The private keys are with them where they use it for signing it, and the public keys are present in the blockchain that is used by this verifier to validate the signature. So in this way, the claim can be validated. That means the identity can be validated. So if you see in this, what happens, there is a third party involved, and that third party approves that or endorse that thing and give it to the client or the user, we can say, and further he signs and keep it with himself. So it is only with this guy. Then he proves whatever he has, he proves it to the verifier. That means once he get the approval, the endorsement, then there is no need to have this particular guy. However, this blockchain is very much required. So in this case, we say if the blockchain is not accessible, then he cannot prove his identity. So which means whatever the self-sovereign says that they hold the data. Yes, they hold the data, but they are dependent on some other things. Okay, so we may say that why not this guy's certificate will be here also, and that is not so easy. The reason is there are so many organizations we may not be knowing. Okay, and we want that validation should be happen in very quick manner. So in that case, if this, let's say there is no blockchain and this guy is maintaining all the public keys of each and every organization, but maybe for one organization he is not having, and he is going to claim with that organization endorsement. In that case, the verifier need to access that organization, request the organization to issue the public key, then validation happens, which will be very slow. So instead of that, if you keep everything in the blockchain, then it will be happening very fast. That's why we can use the blockchain. And you know, once the identity is put or the public key is put, nobody can modify it. Nobody in the sense, maybe we can say the respective owner would like to update their key in the later case. So that is possible. But you know what happens? No other parties can update. Okay, that facility the blockchain provides. So they use blockchain for this. And the same picture is given here in different manner. That's like even they can control, that is the granular control of the data. You can see here this much data he produces to this organization, especially like RTO office. He get the license. Once he get the license, he also signs that license and keep it. But before that, both these parties have registered in the blockchain. Later, when he goes to prove, when the proof is like he is not giving the complete data. You can see this much data, but he gives very limited data to this particular guy, and he get verified. So how it is verified? The keys are available in the blockchain. So through that, it is getting verified. So please let me know if there is any query.
Sir, I think you can proceed, sir.
Okay, madam. So, as I said, self-sovereign does not mean you have full rights to verify your own identity. There is still reliance on some trusted authorities. And the next problem, no, the verifier to whom we are giving our data to verify, they may also store the data. So that in that case, we cannot do anything. For example, if you are going for any mobile service provider shop, for example, we are going to take the new SIM card. Okay, let me come to that later. So, the simple question is, you get phone call from various insurance agencies and the different organizations, but you never knew them before. So in that case, what is your you can say the thought, or how do they know your number, how they get your phone number? Because I got so many calls for this trading and all. I never thought of the trading, but I got the phone call from them. So how do they know our number? Any idea you have? Very simple example I will give you. I was having a medical insurance, and that was about to expire. So just before 1 month of the expiry, I got the call from some other agency, and they are saying that your account is so and so, and it is going to expire, and it has this drawback. Why don't you move to our insurance? So how do they know all these things? So usually money plays the role. Okay, in movie, we might have seen that. Just a second, I think there is some chat message. Yes, these both answers are exactly correct. Okay, in my case, employee is transferred. It is like he was terminated from that particular organization and he joined in some other organization. When he went, he took all the data and went. But there is no proof that he has taken the data. I asked the organization, why don't you go for this legal action against him? They said, yes, we are planning, but I don't know what happened. And another thing is they sell the data. That means for every phone number, they will give 1 rupee. Okay. So, we may think that 1 rupee is nothing, but they give the phone number in bulk. They give 10,000 phone numbers, 20,000 phone numbers. Then you can see how much money they are going to get. There is an attack called click farm attack. So what happens, I'm little diverting from this topic, but please give me 2 minutes. I will explain that. So you all know we have CAPTCHA, that is completely automated Turing machine to tell computer and person separately. So if you are going to create an account or to log in into any account, what happens? They are asking to fill the CAPTCHA, that the letters will be in some format where machine cannot understand. And the next thing, it will ask you choose the images which contain some light or something. What people are doing, let's say there are two organizations, A and B, and both are competitors. And if one is going high, what the next competitor will do, they will go for the click farming attack. So what that means is they rent the people, because the bots are controllable, because they have CAPTCHA and other things. So you cannot write the script and perform or create so many attacks on accounts on. So what they do is they rent the people in massive manner. That means, see, if you are getting bored and sitting at your home, Instead of that, I am asking you, come to a place where you just create an account and I will give you 1 rupee. So they keep massive number of mobile devices and they allow people in shifts. You come and do, if you create these many accounts, you will be getting this much money. So like that, they were doing all these things and try to create so many accounts. So you see, it's not the bot, it's the human doing it. Okay, and they are not doing for their own, they are just like that doing. That means they are creating the spam, but that's not the spam, it's going as the real one. So similarly, our phone numbers will also be given, or if somebody get moved from one organization, they will take it. So, and next, as I was telling about this Airtel shop and all, if you go, you will be giving your fingerprint, because they say it has to be validated through some resources and all. So then what is the guarantee that they are not keeping your fingerprint? See, as we say in self-sovereign, that it is with us only. But what is the guarantee when we are going to prove to somebody he is not misusing it? He may keep it in his storage and later use it. The policy says that you should not store anything, but we are not sure whether they are storing or not. I want to give little introduction about the digital certificate, which is related to what we have seen in this case, so that you can understand how the signature will be used. So I hope you all know the digital certificate, which is used when we are going for HTTPS connection or any protocol or any application which will be using SSL or TLS. So in this case, what happens is we go for the certificate authority. There are so many certificate authorities available, like GoDaddy is there, Komodo is there, like that. There are so many. As a client, what I will do is I will generate my key pair, but there are some people, they ask the trusted that certificate authority to generate the key pair, but that is not advisable. So the client will generate its own key pair and it sends the public key to the certificate authority to get the certificate. So the client gives the public key to this certificate authority through somebody, and then this certificate authority verifies our identity and all through different modes. After verifying it, it issues the certificate. That certificate is with the client. Now this particular certificate is put on our web server, that is in the installation of web server. Whenever somebody browses our web server, what happens is by default on the web server, the certificates of the top certificate authorities are already present. So when you download and install the browsers like Mozilla or Chrome, whatever it may be, by default, the top certificate authorities certificates are already get installed. So let's say this particular authority certificate is installed on the browser. When somebody access my website, which has the SSL certificate, that certificate goes to their browser. That is, it goes to the client browser. What the client browser does is, it sees the signature, whatever is present in my certificate, and that signature gets verified using the public key present in the certificate authority, that whoever issued me the certificate, and their public key is present or their certificate is present in the browser, and the browser takes that public key and verifies the signature, whether the signature is valid or not. If the signature is valid, then the browser knows the website, whatever is claiming the certificate is the right one, and then the service will further start. So in this way, the digital certificate is used. So similarly here, what happens is, whenever this particular node receives the document from him, this particular node takes the public key of the issuer, that is the RTO office, and validate the signature. Once that validation is done, again the key of this guy will be taken and the signature will be validated. Okay, so in that way, the identity of any individual is validated. But there is a major problem. If this guy loses the data or somebody copies the data, then also they can prove the validity, because there is nothing more than this particular key available in this. The one thing he cannot sign again and again, let's say if he is holding this complete data and he has already signed it and available, then if somebody copies that, they can prove. If his signature is not present and somebody is stealing this, then they may not be in position to prove because his signature is required. But you can put the question, if the data is plain, then they can do anything. Yes, they can do, but his signature is also, his key is also required to prove the ownership. So if you are going for the digital signature, see, the major reason I am going for this digital certificate, or to explain the digital certificate here, is the first one, to make you understand how this thing works, that is this complete. And the second one, when we are dependent on a third party, there are too many issues. Okay, we bought certificate from various sources. You can see this. This is given in the forum of the one of the certificate authorities. The centralized authentication scheme always depend on a trusted third party under the assumption that is secure and unbiased. Okay, this is what we think. Though there are certificate authorities like Symantec, GoDaddy, Komodo, like that, there are so many. But there are cases where certificate authorities are forced to issue certificate to a client who is not deserved to get the certificate. So I hope you understand. See, there is somebody applying for a certificate, but he is not at all eligible to get the certificate. But we are forced to give them the certificate. So in that case, what happens? Whatever the protocol you are going to follow, there is no use of such protocol. Okay, so these are the different problems when we are going for the trusted authority based. So that's why they say, let's go for blockchain. Okay, whatever you want to put there. Okay, don't depend on somebody. So we say that it is trusted and we can trust them, but they are also under pressure. They are the right people, but they are under pressure. So what happens? They have to survive in the market. So they will do all these things. And even there are examples. I forgot the name of the country. Their certificate authority is completely compromised. And there are cases, same certificate is given to multiple parties. So then what will happen in all these cases? But if you put in the blockchain, you can reduce those things. Okay, you can mitigate all these things. So the first one introduced is the Namecoin. That is the fork of the Bitcoin, uses blockchain technology for domain name service. So the Namecoin is the fork of the Bitcoin. So what they do there is, we know about the domain name service, that is the DNS. We have to register with the centralized authority with our domain name. It may be .com, .in, .edu, or whatever it may be. But in Namecoin, what happens? They have certain format. Okay, the structure is given, the domain name structure. If you want to register your domain name in that particular system, what you have to do is you have to invest some money on that. That is the Bitcoin you have to invest. Then you create the account. That means you are going to create your new domain name. That means you have registered your domain name into the blockchain. After that, the same domain name cannot be used by anybody else. Okay, so it is like if you are going to create duplicate domain name, then it's not possible. So once you create the domain name, you will put there, and whoever comes first and create the domain name, they will be the owner. It is not like second somebody will come and claim that this is mine. That's not possible. So you can create the domain name, and then you can give that to the people who can use it. So similarly, whoever comes, they can create the domain name, and it makes sure that there is no duplicate. And the major problem with this is anybody can come and create. There is no validity or identity verification. If I want to create with the ID as Government of India, I can create it. That is also allowed. So that's the problem with the Namecoin. And next we can say, without blockchain, what we can do is we can have the puff, which is a physical unclonable function. So here what we can do is when we are designing the chip, okay, so they design the puff where each and every chip will have little variant in the architecture. That is, in the design there will be little variant. So if you give, you will be having 10 computers, let's say, and all 10 uses some chips, and all the chips are having little variant. When you give input to the particular function, the function is same. When you, in all 10 machines, if you give the input, it produces some output. The same output cannot be produced by the next machine because the design is separate. So what happens for every machine, through this puff, they are giving the identity. But what is the problem in this? Again, it is manufacturer dependent. If he want to do something, definitely he can give more than one or more than two, or we can say whatever it may be, the same puff design. And sometimes what happen, due to the manufacturing defect also, more than one can have the same puff design. So that is also the problem. So the decentralized PKI, that is a public key infrastructure. It is like we store the public key there and later it will be used for validating. So in case of public key infrastructure, what happens? Let's say Alice and Bob. What Alice will do, Alice share her public key with Bob. Then when Alice want to prove anything, that Alice will sign her document through her public key and give it to Bob. Since Bob already has the public key of the Alice, then he can validate the document. So this is what happened in public key infrastructure. But when it comes into the decentralized, what happens is it's very simple. Alice and Bob both register into the public blockchain, like we have seen in the self-sovereign. They put their public key into it. So once they put the public key, whoever want to prove something as their own document, they can sign using their private key and send it to the respective person. Let's say here Alice send the document to Bob. What Bob will do is Bob will fetch the public key of Alice from the blockchain and he can verify the validity, the document of Alice. So the one advantage we have here is, let's say we have 100 users connected, and if we want to go for all 100 users to share the public key, it's very complex. If you see the communication, everyone have to go for 99 communication. So instead of that, let all of them register themselves with the blockchain, and all will be having their public key into the blockchain. If anybody want to prove with one person or many person, they will simply send their signature, and those respective persons will pick the public key from the blockchain and they will verify the signature, whatever is given by the respective source. So till now, is it clear? Any doubt you have?
Sir, I think you can proceed.
Okay. So now I will be discussing about one of my work. But before that, I'd like to ask you one question. Let's say we all are in a conference room and we know all each other. Okay, we know each and everyone, and we all are in a conference room. And there is one guy coming into the conference room and he shows something that I am so and so, or he says that I am so and so. Okay, but you never know him before, and there is no trusted authority giving the certificate to him. So then how will you validate him? Is the question clear? We all are there in a room, in a conference room, and we know each of us, and there is a new guy enter into the room and he says that I am Joe Biden, but we don't know him before. So how do we prove that you are so and so or not so and so? Is the question clear? Madam, I hope the question is clear.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, madam. So the problem is here. If you are going for blockchain, anybody can come and put something and claim that I am so and so, because we are not validating. See, in case of this place, there is someone to validate. Okay, but what we say is we don't want that someone. Otherwise, what happens if this guy is compromised, then our system is compromised. So we say that no, we don't want anybody, and this is the situation. Okay, here anybody can come and put something and claim I am so and so. That's what I said in Namecoin also. I will go and create the domain name as gov.in. Okay, but I am not the right one. How we will find that? See, don't think too much. I don't think you will have any answer, because I also don't have any answer. But if possible, you can take it this one as your research and you can find the solution. I was trying for around 2 years to find the solution, but later I am defeated. So if any of you are having solution for this, then please let me also know. We can go for some research on this. So what we thought is, okay, let's drop that idea. We can go for the trust. Okay, based on the trust we do. Once that guy enter, let him climb whatever he or she may be. But let us see his activity. If his activity is good, then let's consider him into the activity of the conference. Otherwise, we don't consider. So it is like if any new person comes into the village or some place, we don't allow him to do all the activities at very first time itself. Let us watch. If he is okay, then we will give him some task. Okay, then we will consider that he is the reliable. But there are problems like, you know, that guy will behave very well in the beginning. Once we start trust him, then he will steal the things and get away. Okay, that is also possible. So what we have done is we have considered our network as the dynamic network. We don't have the permission network. The reason is once we have permission network, we have the trusted third party. and then that third party is responsible for all the registration. So we have considered the smart mobility as the concept. So in smart mobility, what happens? All the vehicles have to register with the, let's say, the RTO office. So we can say that they are the one responsible as the trusted entity. But we have considered the network, which is dynamic. Anybody can come and join, and at any time they can leave. Okay, this is what the concept we have taken. And we categorize the nodes into two, like this. So we have the private nodes and the public nodes. The private nodes are the application developers, and they always be part of the network, and they support in creating the blocks like mining the blocks and other things. And the public nodes, whoever wish to join, they can also come and join in case they also wish to contribute to the network in case of mining the blocks and all, so they can also do that. So we have private nodes and the public nodes. So whenever the node comes, they cannot directly join. They have to approach some of the existing nodes, and those nodes will put or add those node into new node into the blockchain. So once it is added, they can do the activity that is off-chain activities. Even it can perform on-chain activities also. So we consider two types of activity, on-chain and off-chain. On-chain means it takes participation in the blockchain development. Development means growth. It may say go for mining the block. In case of non-blockchain activities, we say that they can share some messages with each other saying that here the traffic is too high, don't take that path. So such kind of messages. So once the node is registered and they communicate with each other, that is offline activities. In that offline activities, the nodes will see that how some other nodes are behaving. Then it can give the vote. Okay. So then that votes are recorded in the blocks. So the count for each and every, the vote count for each and every node is maintained. Also, we put the control, one person can give maximum one vote to any other person. It cannot give more than one. Otherwise, what happens? In one person can give massive number of votes. So even in Big Boss, if you see, they put the restriction that you can give maximum these many number of votes for a person or from a number. Okay. Otherwise, what will happen that one person will give or his relative will give so many number of votes. So like this, we restrict that maximum one vote by a node can be given to another nodes. That also we record. So all these things are getting recorded in the blockchain. Once the vote count, it's not only we consider the vote count, because if we consider only the vote count, no, then we cannot encourage the nodes to give the vote and all and to contribute to the blockchain. So we give, for example, if somebody is mining the block, they are also deserve to get some benefit. Also, if I am giving vote to somebody, that will also get some benefit. The reason, no, if I vote for somebody and there is no benefit, then why should I vote for someone? See, there are so many nodes in the network, and if I am not going to get any benefit, and then why should I vote for somebody? So I'm not comparing with anything else. In general, I am saying, so we are giving benefit to all these guys. So what benefit they are going to get? Because you know, in cryptocurrency, we have the rewards. But in case of this smart mobility and all, there is no reward to give. But what we are doing is we have the toll gates and we have the petrol pump or electric charging point. There they will get the incentive. So through that, we are encouraging the participants in the network to actively participate so that the security of the network will improve. So if somebody have all these counts more than certain threshold, yes, then they are having eligibility to do a lot of activities. If they send some message, definitely the receiver will accept and they can claim the incentive and they can introduce the nodes. So like this, we are trying to give the authorization to any nodes. So even though we say that identity based authentication, it is not actually authentication, we give the authorization. So we have implemented this model using the Go Ethereum implementation, and we introduced so many transactions and we can say the access function, because the transactions go and write the data into the blockchain, and uh, there are functions, access functions, which reads the data from the blockchain. So when we put the transactions, there are different types of transactions. You can see that vote transaction, join transaction, rekeying transaction. So these many types of transactions are there. So for that, it takes approximately, so this experiment was done on the conventional computer, which takes around 20 milliseconds. But when we go for accessing the data from the blockchain, which takes only less than 5 milliseconds, we can say. So why this one takes more time is, here there are so many validation required, including the signatures. So that's why it takes more time here, but here it takes very less time. And this work is uh, published in this IEEE Blockchain Conference 2020. Very recently, we have presented this work. And we have simulated this in the Raspberry Pi device also, because we consider that our network will be having the IoT devices. So when the block count, that is when we access the data, it comes to around 10 milliseconds. But when we go for validation, no, then it goes more than, you can see, it's approximately more than, even though you can see closer to 150, but it is more than 150 seconds. So why this happens is, we have our Raspberry device as the light node. So it does not have the details for the validation. So the transaction validator. So it depends on some full node, and it has to contact and get those transaction validated. That's why it takes a lot of time. Even though the configuration, if you see, the Raspberry Pi has 1 GB RAM only, it's not only depend on that, it also because of the light node facility. So we have the CPU usage and RAM usage of Raspberry device. And what happens in our model, it's not like, you can say that our model, when we are running this Ethereum implementation, Go Ethereum implementation on the usage of the resource usage of CPU and RAM is this much only. That is, see, if it has to validate 100 transactions, then it uses only 15% of the CPU. So what we want to say here is, if you have an IoT device, it is not that you will be specifically have that IoT device for this application only. You can have more than, in addition to this application, you can run some other application also. So that's why we want to show this. And you can see the power consumption also very less. And these, if you see fact creation, fact access, and block synchronization and all, this we have given because we want to even identify if somebody is giving the false claim. Okay, that's the reason we have given. Anyway, this one does not need much discussion. And we have proven we have shown the communication overhead also, because we have to transfer or we have to share the transactions. Not only the transactions, the messages has to be transferred from one machine to another machine. So what is the overhead of all these things? That also we have measured, and with different existing algorithms. So we have proven that ours takes less time, but there are some transaction which takes more overhead compared to the existing models. But what happens is, the frequent transaction, like vote transactions, that takes less overhead when compared to the existing models. So this work is, you can see from internet. The topic is decentralized device model, this particular reference. So here you can find more detail. But what happens, even though we are proving all these things, there is always the vulnerability possible, like ballot stuffing attack or the bad mouthing attack. So that also we have given the solution, but still we are not giving the proper solution for the cyber attack, which is entity and entity which have the infrastructure for one will claim us 10 or more or whatever it may be, more than one. So we have the solution, but it's not appropriate to bring into the real-time applications. So in this way, we try to bring the identity management, that means controlling the access for a device using the blockchain technology. But there are many works reported based on this. Even we have also considered. So in addition to this, whatever I was discussing, that is the trust-based authentication, we brought the concept for the decentralized public key infrastructure also, so that they can have secret communication. That means all the participating nodes put their public key into the blockchain, and whenever they want to have the secret communication, they can use the public key, share the session key through that, then they can have the secret communication. But what happens in Go Ethereum implementation, by default, there is a concept available, which is Whisper, which gives the secret communication through the data available in the Go Ethereum blockchain itself. So I have experimented that also, but I have not given that because the reason is, when you have to make the secure communication, you have to make a group. That is the topic you have to create, and within the topic only you can communicate with each other. If the topic differs, then you cannot communicate. So which means for each and every communication you have to create a topic. So that's why we have not used that concept. But when you download the Go Ethereum implementation, you will get that also. And very important thing, when you are going for this IoT devices, as I was telling in the beginning itself, the storage, the IoT devices cannot give the storage, even if we see that only it has to store the header. I think in Ethereum, the header size is approximately 300 KB. Okay, so if you see that number of blocks mined right now is too much, okay, then you have to multiply with that 300 KB and see the size, how much storage size is required. But we have suggested that let's go for the IOTA snapshot. But right now we are proposing our own mechanism, how we can reduce the storage size and have our secure network. But still there are one or two problems. We are working on it that we think that we could solve very soon. So that's it about my presentation. If you have any doubt, then please let me know. So it's not only on this topic. If you want to ask questions related to blockchain, then I am happy to answer.
Participants, if you have any queries or questions, you can ask him or either post it in the chat box. I think there's no questions from the participants, sir.
Okay, madam.
Thank
And one suggestion of mine to everyone: if you want to do research on blockchain, please do that very fast, because there are so many works getting reported. Okay, at later point of time, even though you have your idea right now, and due to some other administrative works or some family work, if you are delaying, by that time definitely your concept might have published by somebody else. It's not that they will steal your concept and publish, but massive number of people are working. So there is a possibility that whatever you have in your mind, same might be with some others also. Okay, that's the reason. So thank you all, and it's nice to interact with you all. Thank you very much, madam, for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for a valuable session, sir. And thank you for sharing your knowledge and valuable inputs. I hope all the participants would have gained valuable insights on the topic of the session. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, madam. So shall I leave now?
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Participants, Bhaskar sir, would you like to post the feedback in the chat box, sir?
Madam, I am leaving.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.